Welcome to the Great Canadian Tour. I'm Glen McInnis. Well, today we come to you from the province of Saskatchewan, and it's here at the Batoche National Historic Site where we begin. Well, since Canada was in its infancy, the Métis people have played a pivotal role in the development of this country. They were go-betweens for the fur traders and the First Nations at that time, and even though they played an important role, their history has been riddled with hardship, hope, happiness, bloodshed, and despair. So this is a story of the challenges they face and the struggles that continue to this day.
The origin of the Métis Nation is ingrained in the fabric of Canada. It was in the Canadian Northwest that they evolved into a new and distinct Aboriginal nation. Born a mixture of French, Scottish, and British fur traders and Cree, Ojibwe, and Dene women, the Métis developed as a people. They were distinct from either Indian or European. They developed a new Aboriginal language and culture. With their mixed traditions and command of both European and Indian languages, the Métis played a fundamental role in the history of Canada. The majority of the Métis people settled in the Red River area. Their community flourished. By 1869, there were over 9,000 Métis and only 1,600 Europeans and Canadians living in the area. An enigmatic and charismatic leader had emerged, Louis Riel. He set out to negotiate with Ottawa for Métis rights. The Red River area was originally controlled by the Hudson's Bay Company. In 1869, they sold a majority of their rights to the new Dominion of Canada. The Métis resisted the takeover of their homeland, known today as the Red River Resistance. Led by Louis Riel, a provincial government was formed. After negotiating with the federal government, it was agreed that the Red River settlement would enter Confederation as the new province of Manitoba. Not long after, the Prime Minister of the time, Sir John A. Macdonald, dispatched a military expedition to establish control over the new province. With the arrival of the military, Louis Riel fled to the American territory to live in exile. The fur trade and buffalo hunt were declining. Many Métis were in a desperate need for money.
The failure of Riel to obtain guarantees for the Métis in Manitoba made some come to the conclusion they have to relocate. So they went west, here to Batoche, along a major trading route, where the South Saskatchewan River meets the Carleton Trail.
Lee Penner is a tour guide at the Batoche National Historic Site. His knowledge and ties to Métis history are strong. His great-great-grandmother was born at the beginning of the Northwest Rebellion. He explains why the Métis moved to Batoche.
During the Red River Resistance in 1870, there was a lot of animosity between the new settlers arriving and the Métis trying to keep their language, their way of life, their culture. They seen a lot of that stuff was being eroded, and they wanted to keep that. I'm coming out to Batoche area, the South Saskatchewan River. It was actually an historic hunting ground for the Métis, so they knew they had good game, good land. They knew a lot of people in the area, and so it was just a natural progression. They wanted to keep their language, way of life, and this was kind of a fresh start for them.
The community thrived. It was prosperous. They turned to farming. The Métis built a church, rectory, stores, houses, and a school. But things were about to change. The village was to become the site of the last battlefield in the Northwest Rebellion Métis Resistance of 1885.
Lee, talk to me about the events that led up to the battle here in Batoche.
Well, just before the battle, you actually have a coalition of local Métis people and white settlers in the area. It wasn't just Métis had a lot of grievances against the government. We have a national policy starting to be established that's requiring all the farmers to buy the implements from down east. And we see a lot of that happening where the Métis are seeing people come into their lands. They're losing their language again, the culture. There's a fear of what happened in Red River starting again. And they have surveyors arriving again, starting to stake out the new land where the railway is supposed to be going. Again, there's a lot of miscommunication. They're not being told a lot what's going on.
By 1884, the Métis who had moved to the Batoche settlement were becoming increasingly frustrated. Their petitions and requests made to the federal government were being ignored. Their traditional lifestyle was being threatened. They asked Louis Riel to return from exile to help them. He agreed and signed an oath to, quote, save our country from a wicked government by taking up arms if necessary.
They bring Riel up because he actually trained as a legal secretary when he was in school in Montreal. He had that background in the English language, which is how he had to communicate with the government in Ottawa. And with his knowledge of reading and writing, he was a very well-spoken man. He was brought up to represent the Métis in their claims against the government. And we see a series of petitions being sent to Ottawa. A lot of them aren't being answered. And eventually this leads up to the decision to take up arms and defend their territory.
And for 4 days in early May 1885, approximately 300 Métis and First Nations people led by Gabriel Dumont clashed with 900 government troops under the command of Major General Frederick Middleton. In order to defend themselves, the Métis built rifle pits around Batoche.
Did the Métis have some success in fighting the militia?
Oh, a lot. The military didn't actually make it past the cemetery until the 4th day of the battle. So this is the first day they make it here, and they never made it this far again until the 4th day of the battle. They used the rifle pit strategy, so they were entrenched in 5-foot high or deep holes, all dug by hand, 200 or 300 on this side of the river, another 100 on the other side of the river. Never knowing where they were going to be attacked from, so they had to have defensive strategies all over. And the rifle pit strategy was done so they actually had fallback lines. And so they actually had a series of pits that they could fall back. And it was really unique because they actually put some of their clothing on broomsticks, hold them up. The soldiers would fire at that, thinking it was a Métis man. Their partner would be positioned 100 yards away, see the discharge of the flame, the smoke, and fire back at the guy.
It's pretty crafty.
Really crafty. And one man would actually man 3 pits. He'd run back and forth. So from where the military perspective was, they were thinking they were fighting up to 1,000 men. Realistically, we were fighting 200-300 Métis and First Nations.
And the Métis women of Batoche played an essential role in the battle.
The women's role out here was huge. They're not talked about in history because unfortunately history is written by basically the white European male point of view. And it's unfortunate because a lot of the stories for us were preserved by the Métis women. They were the ones that taught the languages and those things. So in my own family, all my stories come from my great-great-grandmother through the women's line. And during the battle, the women did tremendous things. I mean, they were the doctors and nurses. We have records of them treating soldiers who had just been wounded with no real official medical experience, but they had the traditional medical experience. And that's what they used to save these men's lives. They come out at night, they bring food to the men in the pits. They become the doctors, nurses, the messengers. Basically, their entire role, the military had 200 men doing the same job these 20 to 30 women did for the Métis.
On May 12, 1885, after 3 days of fighting, Middleton used his force's superior numbers to make an assault. His troops took the village. More than 25 men from both sides were killed in the battle. It was said the spirit of the rebellion or resistance was broken. Riel surrendered shortly after. He was tried for treason and executed. The times after 1885 were difficult ones for the Métis. Many moved away. The defeat at Batoche and the death of Riel was an enormous blow to the Métis people.
Following the battle, did life go back to normal somewhat, or was it a bit harder?
It did, but it took about 10, 15 years for the Métis to really reestablish themselves. I mean, a lot of these people lost everything. When their houses were destroyed, you had no banks in those days, so you lost absolutely everything you owned. You lost all your money, your house, your tools were burnt, the barns were burnt, animals were taken. A lot of the animals the military were using, the cattle, were actually from local Métis people. And so a lot of them lost everything, and it took them about 10 years to reestablish their wealth. It was a lot of despair. It took a lot of time for the Métis to recover. But they had that community sense, they worked together, and they reestablished themselves, and you see the community really prospering by 1896.
For the Métis, Batoche is a sacred place. It's where their ancestors resisted marginalization. It has been said that it's the Saskatchewan equivalent of the Plains of Abraham. All that remains at the site are the remnants of Métis rifle pits, the church, the rectory, and the cemetery containing the graves of 9 Métis killed during the Battle of Batoche.
And to this day, the Métis are still fighting to preserve tradition. Hundreds of years ago, they roamed the prairie in search of buffalo. While those days are long gone, they feel the same principles should apply, simply because it's part of their culture.
Métis groups across the prairies are determined for the provincial governments to honor their constitutional rights to hunt and fish year-round. In 2003, a Supreme Court of Canada ruling said the Métis have the Aboriginal right to hunt and fish for food. The provinces are finding it hard to comply with this decision. Here in Saskatchewan, leaders of the Métis Nation have started negotiations with the provincial government. It's come after decades of legal wrangling. The Métis have won more than 5 illegal hunting cases in the court and feel it's time to negotiate, not litigate.
One sticking point in this discussion is what constitutes a Métis community. They feel it doesn't matter. So whether they live in a city or out in the open land, they feel they should be able to hunt and fish whenever and wherever they'd like. And one worry they have is that there will be geographical restrictions.
They are trying to define it as geographical, but we're saying no. We're going to try and define it as a province-wide harvesting agreement.
Alan Morin is the Vice President of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. He comes from a Métis community located in the northern part of the province and is, of course, proud of his heritage.
And no matter where you would live, if you were Métis and you lived, 300 kilometers out of town, and you were basically the only Métis within several miles, even several hundred miles, you would still have the right, that's what you're looking for, right? To have the right to be able to do hunt, fish whenever you want.
Well, what I can say to that is that a lot of our people have moved from northern Saskatchewan, for example, to an urban setting like Saskatoon, Prince Albert, or Regina. I'll use myself as an example. I live in Saskatoon. I live in an apartment building, and if I want to exercise my right, I will go back to my traditional territory and go and exercise my rights over there to hunt, fish, and gather for food. Because the cost of living is so high in the province of Saskatchewan, especially when you're living in an urban setting. Sometimes you have to hunt, fish, and trap for food, and you do have to exercise your right in order to feed your family. Because a lot of our people are on social assistance and stuff and barely making it in the urban settings, for example.
The Métis Nation of Saskatchewan say they've tried for years to negotiate with the previous NDP government, but were continuously ignored. And several court cases were won in favor of the Métis. The new Saskatchewan Party government has decided to sit down and hammer things out, but they declined to participate in this story because the matter is still ongoing.
The Saskatchewan Métis Nation are looking to set up a registry in their province to define Métis citizenship. They estimate there are approximately 80,000 Métis living in Saskatchewan alone.
With that registry, we will have what we call an objectively verifiable identification system. And with that system, we'll begin to define who has harvesting rights and who can exercise hunting and fishing. And we're saying every Métis who becomes a citizen of the Métis Nation has harvesting rights. So therefore, under the objectively verifiable identification system, we will say to the province of Saskatchewan, our negotiating partner, that needs to be recognized by the province as a registry. So therefore, when they encounter an individual, say somewhere in a traditional territory, exercising their right, as long as they have a Métis card and meet the definition and meet the identification, then the conservation officers will respect that and they won't charge the individual.
What about in terms of capacity? How much you can take from the land, take from the water? Does any of that come into play?
With rights comes responsibility. Even though we have rights, we have responsibility as Métis people. So it's important that we discuss with our people that there must be certain regulations and enforcement issues that they have to deal with, and to keep the law in this province.
Morin believes that negotiating the harvesting agreement instills pride into the future generations, but admits there are many challenges ahead.
Aside from hunting and fishing rights, are there still obstacles that the Métis face that existed 150, 200 years ago?
We continue to struggle as Métis people in this country, and in order for us to assert our rights as Métis people. And a lot of the rights that we're asserting at this time are the same rights that Louis Riel and our forefathers talked about 150 years ago. Yes, to the question, we are still talking about some of the stuff that we talked about way back when.
But Morin's hope, and the hope of other Métis leaders in Saskatchewan, is that as time passes, the wrongs of history will be corrected, and they can go back to what they've been doing for generations, living from the land.
We're here with Mayor Don Acheson of Saskatoon. Mayor Acheson, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
My first question for you is, what makes this part of the country so unique? I know you're the mayor. You might be a little biased, I'm saying, maybe thinking, but what do you think?
Oh, I'm not biased at all. It's the people that truly make the difference in our community, a can-do attitude. Things are happening here. We have the most balanced economy in all of Canada. People need to know, for example, we do more steel fabrication west of Toronto than any other place. We're the potash capital of the world. We provide the United States of America with 7% of its energy requirements. We have oil, we have everything. But most important, we've got people, and they're great.
Weather. Good summers.
The lakes, the scenery outside the city, the prairies. That's what makes it. And the cultural diversity of this whole city is just amazing. I've been to other cities and it just doesn't compare to Winnipeg.
Sunshine, our wonderful golf courses, the affordability of life here, and the wonderful people we have in this province and in this city.
Our cultures, all our different unique cultures in regards to, I guess, accepting each other.
Friendly people, and you know, it's a different atmosphere than you find some parts of the country.
Okay, ma'am.
I agree. Also, the wide open spaces, small towns. Yeah, great people.
I don't know. I think Manitoba is very culturally diverse, which is one thing I love about Winnipeg specifically. We have lots of different restaurants and different festivals and lots of great things to do in the summertime.
Well, it's right in the center of Canada, and and Winnipeg is a beautiful city, I think, and so I think that's partly why.
Once again with Mayor Don Acheson of Saskatoon. Mayor Acheson, my question, what is the most memorable moments in Canadian history?
I think one of them has to be the Canada-Russia hockey series. And the reason I say that is because I think there were so many Canadians that were, in fact, sitting at their TV sets and watching. Paul Henderson scoring that final goal in the dying seconds, where the Russians still claim they won the series because they'd scored more goals than Canada did. But in fact, Canada won the series, as we know, on games. And being an ex-hockey player myself, I think it was just a great moment for all of us in Canada.
Confederation.
The establishment of Canada as a nation in 1867, and the establishment of the British North America Act.
Probably Confederation.
Probably Henderson's goal in '72, maybe. I was like 4 or 6 when that went in, so don't really remember it, but everyone talks about it.
I'd probably say how our independence wasn't from a war, and we we're still under the monarchy and that, but we didn't have to fight anybody like in the States and that to become a country. I think that's pretty incredible.
When Terry Fox came off the road in his second bout with cancer, that's what sticks with me, because to me, he is a Canadian hero.
Saskatchewan is one of the world's largest suppliers of potash. In fact, it's responsible for about 1/3 of production globally, and its value is rising. Here in Esterhazy is where the story of potash in Saskatchewan begins. So, join us as we find out what it is, where it comes from, and what potash means to the future of this province.
400 million years ago, much of the prairies were covered in a sea of salt water. After it evaporated, it left behind beds of salt rich in potassium, and that's how potash deposits came to be found here. And potash is big business here in the province of Saskatchewan. It's one of Canada's largest resources and a major export commodity, and it's expected to fuel the economy for a long time to come. Experts predict that Saskatchewan's potash reserves are large enough to supply the world fertilizer demand for several hundred years. 10 mines in Saskatchewan produce potash from 1,000 to 1,800 meters below the surface. This is a $2 billion per year business and keeps over 6,000 people employed.
It also helps in other ways, obviously for agricultural reasons, but it keeps the trains very busy, filling about 150,000 of these cars every year at 100 tons per car. That, my friends, is a lot of potash.
But what exactly is potash?
Potash is used mainly as fertilizer to help plants like these grow, but its use goes back many centuries to the Native American Indians, who used it to enrich the soil, to, of course, stimulate plant growth.
But to mine potash, you have to dig way down, way, way down. And as potash mines are not regularly open to visitors for underground tours, the Interpretive Center gives you an idea what it feels like to be right there. John Nightingale is the Potash Interpretive Center chairman in Esterhazy.
Well, this is the typical shaft, mine shaft, and this is about half the size of the real shaft. An actual shaft is 18.5 feet in diameter. Many of them are anyway. And we have this here to show the formations from surface to the potash level down here.
This is incredible.
it just shows you a scale of how deep they go. And I mean, we're looking at the CN Tower, and it's still dwarfed. I mean,
yeah.
How deep is this?
This is 3,140 feet to the top of the Potash Formation here, and this would be the shallowest mine in the province. Some of them are 3,500 feet deep.
And at the ground level is where the benefits are felt. It's hard to visit Esterhazy without noticing the impact of potash. They are, after all, the potash capital of the world. It's located in southeastern Saskatchewan, has a population of just over 2,500, and is enjoying the booming potash industry. Helen Solms is a journalist for the local newspaper, the Miner Journal.
So Helen, these are exciting times here in Esterhazy. So as a local journalist, what's your take on it all?
Well, they certainly have been exciting times ever since Potash Corp announced their $1.8 billion expansion in the Rocanville area in November, and followed by the Mosaic announcement. It's both exciting and challenging. The town council, for example, is working non-stop to make sure that they have enough residential property and enough commercial property to handle the influx of laborers that we expect very shortly.
And the people of Esterhazy are hoping to attract the young people back.
We still hear individual stories of young people who were perhaps working in the oil patches, who've always wanted to come back to Saskatchewan. Now with the expansions, they are coming back and they plan to stay. So that's encouraging too.
The town's benefited tremendously. The company here, as companies across the province, have been very, very supportive of the town. They put extra money into the school. They built a lot of the recreation facilities. They sort of made Esterhazy their home. And of course, all the people having good jobs, it creates a fairly wealthy town. I wouldn't say we're extraordinarily wealthy, but we're one of the better towns in Saskatchewan.
Drive 5 hours north of Esterhazy, and you'll find another Saskatchewan city that is reaping the benefits of the potash demand. Saskatoon is Saskatchewan's largest city, with an estimated population of just over 208,000 and growing. A few years back, the city celebrated its 100th birthday, and according to Mayor Donald Atchison, they're optimistic about the next 100.
Mayor, first tell me about the economic effects that potash has had for your city of Saskatoon.
Well, first of all, it's been absolutely phenomenal what it's done for the city of Saskatoon. The Potash Corporation of Saskatchewan has its international headquarters right here in Saskatoon.
But why all this demand for potash globally? Why now?
Well, the price of potash has gone right through the roof compared to what it was traditionally. Profits are up. But more important, what's happening is that the third world countries now are discovering that by using potash, they increase their productivity of their lands tremendously, and that they're able to feed more people. What I can tell you about Saskatoon is that we're one of the top 2 economies in all of Canada. Last year we were second only to St. John's, Newfoundland. We've been in the top 6 cities for the last 5 years now as well. It just continues to boom here. Housing prices have gone up, and the reason they've gone up is because the economy is going through this tremendous resiliency right now. People in our community are saying, how long will it last? Well, it's going to last for a long time with all the things that are happening with potash, uranium, the oil industry, transportation, steel fabrication, the agricultural industry. And that's why the Conference Board of Canada says we have the most balanced economy in all of Canada. And when we're going through tremendous recessions and depressions with the agricultural community, the city of Saskatoon continued to grow. And now it's even growing at a faster pace right now. And we just see great things happening over the next few years.
In a short time, Saskatchewan has grown in ways some would never have guessed. And many are saying the good old days for the province are here, right now.
Once again, here with Mayor Don Atchison of Saskatoon. Mayor Atchison, my next question for you is, who is the most influential Canadian politician, living or dead, of all time?
Actually, I believe there's about 3 of them. First of all, John A. Macdonald, building a railway across this great nation of ours. When you think in Saskatoon, we just recently accomplished the completion of an approval for a south bridge that took 100 years to get into place, and how Prime Minister could build a railway across our great nation. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. I look to Pierre Elliott Trudeau in the sense of the Canada with its sovereignty and being able to have its own flag and that, and its own identity, I think, in that area. And last but not least, right here in the province of Saskatchewan, Tommy Douglas as well, who was voted by Canada as one of the most influential people and the #1 politician in our nation, and for Medicare and that. So I think those are the 3 people that I would, in fact, look to as being very influential people.
I would have to say Pierre Trudeau.
Why is that?
He had the biggest impact, and his breadth was across multiple generations. He wasn't just focused on one group. He was on all the groups out there.
Pierre Trudeau.
Why?
He had the kahunas to try to do things that weren't popular and were ahead of their time, I think.
Okay, sir.
I would tend to agree, I think, because he was the person that really kind of put Canada on the map as kind of a world powerhouse.
Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I don't know, I did a project on him in grade 7. And he did amazing things for Canadian politics, just in getting people aware and inspiring people to vote.
I'd say Trudeau. He said fuddle duddle and swore at people.
C'est fort divertissant les Vox Pop si on regarde Détonation avec Joëlane Blanchette. Joëlane recueille des opinions sur les grandes questions de l'heure tout en vérifiant notre connaissance du Canada. Détonation à CEPAC.
L'animateur Pierre Donnet reçoit les acteurs les plus en vue des milieux parlementaires, politiques et